Welcome to The Fairer Sense.
With me, Tanya.
And me, Kara.
Women, money, and the fight to break even.
Because we give a shit. And you should too. Today, a look back at Season 2. Hey, Tanya.
Hey, Kara.
Here we are, the last episode. Not of all time.
Not of all time. Yeah. When you said that, I was like, even though I know all of our vision. Yeah, not of all time, just for Season 2. But I can't believe, well, I shouldn't say I can't believe it's over already because it was a fairly long season, but it feels like we're just getting started in some ways.
Yeah, I really feel that this season was great. And we also learned a lot about what we want from the podcast, about how to do podcast things, mainly me with the learning about how to do podcast things. So yeah, in some ways it does feel like we should just be cranking it up again. But in fact, we are winding it down.
We'll share a little bit later on in this episode why that is and kind of our vision for the future of the Fairer Sense. But for me, I really loved this season. I feel like looking back, I feel really proud of this season and some of the things we've been able to tackle, some of the people we've talked to. And there are just a ton of highlights for me. But also there were some tough moments and some things that were challenging either in what we shared or what we talked about or some of the listener responses to that. So I think it'd be really fun to get into that.
What was your favorite episode or episodes?
I mean, hands down, I think this will probably surprise no one who listened to this episode and heard my conversation on it. But number 15, Toxic Masculinity, I think might be my all-time favorite The Fairer Sense episode. I know everyone loves Emotional Labor from Season 1, which was number 4. Certainly the episodes where we brought the guys on have been great, but that one with Piggy and Kitty from Bitches Get Riches was just like next level to me. And I loved your interview with your cousin Sam, who was on Project Runway and had really beautiful, insightful things to say about misogyny and how that relates to gay men as well. Yeah, I love that episode so much.
That episode went hard. That was a great episode. Yeah.
Did I just share something about it too?
Yes.
For those of you who are not Kara and me and don't see the podcast get recorded, we each always know what's going into every episode, but Kara didn't know that I was leaving in that bit at the end of the Bitches Get Riches chat that definitely went away from family friendly. And if you haven't heard and you don't know what I'm talking about, please go listen. You will not regret it. It has a language warning for a reason. So heed that. But Kara, I loved when you described the text you sent me after you listened to it.
It shocked me. I mean, I have no Puritan, but I was like, damn. Well, and I had just shared it with my aunt because my cousin is on the show. And then I was like, ooh, listen. After Sam's portion, it gets a little racy. Don't share it with grandma. I literally had to send that text.
That's amazing. Don't share it with grandma. So yeah, so that was my favorite. I mean, it was obviously like our raciest episode ever, but I really loved the discussion that we had and the fact that, you know, I think anybody who's listened to us for more than 5 seconds knows we are not here to bash guys. We are here to tear down the patriarchal structures that disproportionately harm women, but also harm men. And that was, I think, one of my favorite things in that episode, that we really talked a lot about how toxic masculinity doesn't just harm women, it also harms men. And that's a big deal. That's a problem. We need to fix that.
That episode was great. I didn't have a clear favorite. I'm really proud of everything that we got into this season. I really liked the beauty standards episode and our first episode of the season, Money Things Women Aren't Taught, because my big thing with the patriarchy is focusing on the parts of it that are really invisible and thus all the more insidious, but all the more difficult to talk about. And so the invisible pressures and terribleness of sexism, I think, really come into play on those 2 episodes where it's like, yeah, you know, women have been sold this bill of goods that like shaving your legs or waxing your vagina is empowering, but even as it empties your bank account and is literally painful. And it's an invisible thing almost when you go into the bank and the loan officer only talks to your husband or your partner and not to you. And you're just like, I want to bring this up, but I don't want to be seen as, bitchy or cold or something. So I felt like we really dug into a lot of that kind of stuff on those episodes, and that made me happy.
Amen. Has there been anything this season that has been hard for you, either to share or to talk about or to respond to emails about?
Yes. I mean, in general, I like to consider myself an open book. And when I do finally publish my memoir, people will be like, we've heard this on the podcast for years. So, but something that was really difficult for me. So I respond to pretty much every email we get. And we got 2 this season that I have yet to respond to because the topic is really difficult. So we had mentioned.
It was in our bonus episode on things we disagree on, which this was not actually a thing we disagree on. It just sort of came up as a throwaway comment that I made, which was that you can't be a feminist and be anti-choice, because that's ultimately saying that women should not have autonomy over their bodies, which I think is in direct opposition to the principles of feminism, which is that men have autonomy over their bodies, therefore women should also have autonomy.
Which I totally agree with, and which we got some emails from people who don't necessarily agree with, or who one in particular wanted us to cut some anti-choice people some slack and not alienate them on the podcast, which has sat heavy with me for weeks. Because on the one hand, I don't want to alienate people. I do want this to be a safe space for people to come. On the other hand, it is like a core principle that makes up my body. It's like, bones, marrow, and the belief in being pro-choice that makes up Kara Perez. And when people tell me to compromise on that or ask me to consider an anti-choice stance, it really hurts me. Because considering an anti-choice stance is considering giving up power over my own damn body and asking millions of women to do the same. And not just my body, but my life and my choices in the direction that I want to go in. And I just cannot reconcile those two things. And again, I don't want to isolate anyone, but that is a line in the sand for me. And thus, I have not responded to these emails because it's so hard to write an email in that you can't control tone, you can't convey, I can't express anything with my face or my hands. And I express a lot with my hands via email. And I didn't want to make it sound like I was yelling or that I was preaching or pontificating in any way. As we always say at the end of every episode, I always want to hear from people, whether or not they agree with me. So bravo to the listeners. Thank you for writing into us. You certainly gave me a lot to think about. Ultimately, I just ended up where I already was. But I do want to say thank you for listening and thank you for writing.
You can tell those 2 emails in particular were things that really made us think and also, I think, struggle a little bit. I'll say for me, the toughest thing was deciding to do episode 19, Invisible Disability, and deciding how much to share. This has been an interesting year for me because after retiring early, I have felt more able to share some of the stuff that I never really talked about publicly before because, I didn't want that to color people's perception of me at work. And as we talked about in that episode, I really kept most of my health stuff private, where someone like Kate, who is our guest on that show, shared a ton of stuff at work. And I respect her choice entirely. It was not the same choice I made. So it's just interesting now to be open about some stuff that feels very vulnerable. And at the same time, I think that's really important. I think it's important that, especially in this age of curated social media feeds, that we all are trying to share more of the vulnerable stuff and not just like the pretty vulnerable stuff, but like all of it. And so ultimately, I think that was a good learning experience for me that, you can share this stuff and it's going to be okay. This is a safe space here. So yeah, I'm glad I did, but that was definitely a lot of hand-wringing leading up to it.
For what it's worth, I'm very glad you shared and touched that you decided to share on our joint venture here. And yeah, I was really touched too on that same episode. Dr. Thorpe that I interviewed shared with me out of the blue that she deals with depression. And for her to also bring that up, I was very touched. These are complicated situations, and certainly to out yourself, and especially to have to out yourself and then perhaps carry around other feelings about outing yourself, it's a lot. It's an emotional load. So thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, she was awesome. I do think that the guest of the season award for me goes to Amanda Holden, who is Dumpster Dog, the Dumpster Dog blog. It's so funny. When we ask people to come on the show, we always tell them, here's the theme we're talking about. Here's why I think you're uniquely suited to talk about it. And here's specifically your experience that we want to get into. But I was sort of expecting that chat with her to just kind of be like, hey, isn't makeup bullshit? Yeah. Doesn't it suck that women's beauty stuff costs so much? Yeah. Boo. And instead, she came in with like all these stats. It was like talking to you, but times 10, Kara. She was like, here's the fat pay gap. And here's, the added up cost of all the pink tax things. And so shout out Amanda, Dumpster Doggy. We love you. You were amazing. That episode absolutely was so filled with substance. Thanks to her.
We do love Amanda. Like, this is a joint, real, passionate love. Yeah. So, I mean, co-signed on everything. We ask at the end of every episode that y'all reach out to us, and we have been floored at the response we have gotten from day one, really. Between the reviews, the tweets, the emails, we have heard from a lot of you. And I want to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time to write to us in some manner. Today, we're going to highlight a few of the emails that just made my heart sing with joy. Thank you so much. Starting with Christine. Christine wrote in and said, I wanted to tell you that I love, all caps love, the podcast and your nuanced, thoughtful takes on money, especially because you discuss through the lens of women and the different ways we're impacted and socialized by the patriarchy in how we interact, manage, and feel about it. You're both so smart, and I love your dynamic. You both bring different perspectives to conversations I've been having in real life with friends, and I constantly find myself challenged, laughing, and nodding along. The conversation is always so respectful, thought-provoking, and fun. I truly look forward to each episode. Okay. I've had to pull myself up off the floor because I died just there again. But I wanted to bring this up. Obviously, this is a glowing review, and thank you so much for listening, for writing it to us, Christine. You've changed me forever. But I also wanted to point out, this made my heart sing because we do really try. We put a lot of effort into this podcast. We try to find guests that we think have interesting, unique takes on big picture issues. We do try to be really respectful and inclusive on this show. And to hear that that is getting across is really nice.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny because when we were talking about which notes to pull, I was like, I don't think we should have the glowing review ones because that's like tooting our own horn. But I agree with this. And, we did receive other notes or other reviews like this. And so I think, just to echo Kara's thanks, thank you. It's wonderful to know that what your intention is actually what's translating. And we work really hard on the show. We could certainly produce a weekly show if we wanted to have a different standard, but we aren't just interested in bringing uncurated interviews to you guys. We want to make sure that every episode has a clear theme, that all of our guests have a different perspective on it, that we're able to bring something to the table that maybe folks haven't thought about before, or an angle on it that's different. And that takes a lot more time and a lot more work. So reviews like that just really, really warm our hearts. And I feel seen, we feel seen. So thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because honest to God, I am just sitting right now in my home office, literally talking into a pillow, trying to mimic that studio sound. Sometimes it just feels like shouting into the void. So it's just nice.
Yeah, have you showered today? I have not showered today.
No. And it's 97 degrees outside. So.
Yeah, it's not pretty behind the scenes, but that's not what matters. And yeah, so...
Oh, man.
Oh, real talk.
We are great. Mm-hmm.
I think more topically, yeah, we have received some wonderful emails from folks in response to some of our episodes, and a couple of our favorites. We can't read them all, unfortunately, but obviously we have read them all, and Kara has responded to virtually all of them. But number 14, the economics of motherhood, we really did focus a lot in that episode, talking with both Jamila and Karina about kind of maternity leave and corporate policies around that, or how you do your maternity leave if you work for yourself. But Christina wrote to us and said, I humbly throw out that this is the tip of the iceberg, which editorial note. We totally agree, Christina, but her email really sums this up well. She says, the return to work, the daily struggles of working motherhood is where it all begins to crumble. Most young mothers return excitedly to work with an I can do this attitude. Having used up much of their sick and vacation time to have any sort of income during maternity leave, mothers are left in a deficit, petrified that if their child gets sick or has a doctor's appointment, they are in a shortage of their leave bank. And they get sick a lot, especially in daycare. That's the tangible side. The intangible, the eye rolling at, I need to take my child to the pediatrician this afternoon, or can I come in an hour later to catch my child's holiday program, is a little something I call the visibility index. I love that term, by the way, Christina. Those in charge, read the patriarchy, wanted to see you at your desk from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. You needed to be visible at company lunches, company outings, company committees. The higher your index, the higher your potential for promotions and earnings. Also, can we mention the irony of, oh, what a good daddy when men would leave to go coach a t-ball game or a pediatrician's appointment? The perfect storm of this, coupled with, let's say, breastfeeding, mommy guilt, not making enough to hire housework help, equals disaster, leading to many women simply throwing up their hands during these pivotal earning years of age 25 to 35 to sit at home. Sometimes, whether intentionally or unintentionally, shifting the household income to one primary breadwinner, regardless of the work being done at home. So many layers here, and I say bravo for throwing it out there in the discussion circles. So yeah, thank you again, Christina. Such a great, thoughtful note. And absolutely, I think this is an issue that we will come back to again and again because there is so much more to it. We just kind of started at the very first moments of motherhood, of having the child, but for sure, the penalty and the way that the system is set up currently, there are so many different things to discuss and dig into there.
Yeah, I loved that email, and her point I agree with, so spot on. It really is just the tip of the iceberg. So we will definitely be circling back into working moms. We got another email from Heather on our episode, Breaking into the Boys Club Part 1. Heather says, in addition to it being frustrating that women have to make ideas seem like the men thought of them, this situation reinforces structural gender bias. Men continue to think they are better workers / have all the good ideas, so women continue to be locked out of promotions, pay raises, being taken seriously, etc. And it doesn't help overturn how men, quote, steal women's ideas in meetings and other places. And yes, I think I responded to this in all caps, you get me, because this is another one of those kind of invisible things that, in Heather's own words, reinforces structural gender bias. What she was referencing was Felicity on that episode mentioned how she will sometimes have to do some emotional labor and make men think, oh, they had this idea, or she's presenting something in a non-threatening, non-challenging way, which then goes to, the man thinking, oh, I had such a good idea, pat myself on the back. And like, women never have good ideas.
Which I will say too, is something we've heard from multiple other guests, but we can't use the full interview every time. But Felicity was not the first one to raise that with us, and she will not be the last.
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's such a common experience. And again, it's just one of those things that we all know is happening, but it's very hard to kind of pin down and explain to other people and then destroy. So thank you so much, Heather, for writing that in. You put it so eloquently.
Yeah, for sure. Another episode that got some mail from folks was number 16, financial feminism, which is a term that we're really hoping to push out there into the world because feminism is so often thought of, especially by people who don't really understand what the term means, but it's often thought of as hating men or burning bras or like just not wanting to, I don't know, like get married and take a husband's name. I don't honestly know all the things that people who don't get it think about it, but there is such a money inequality aspect of it. And it feels like talking about financial feminism helps get that point across a little bit better, that we're really just talking about getting rid of the wage gap, getting rid of the wealth gap, getting rid of the opportunity gap, and closing all those structural barriers that are holding back women and marginalized people. So an email that we got that we loved was a different take on the definition. Krista wrote and told us financial feminism means that no woman would have to remain in an abusive relationship. It also means that men would no longer be threatened by women who make more money than they do. I think those are two concepts, but Kara, I know we both agree with both of them. The idea of being trapped by money, of not being able to get out of an abusive relationship or just an unhealthy one, the idea of not being able to leave a job that's very unhealthy for you with abusive management or even something like sexual harassment. All of that is very much a factor of the wage gap and the fact that women have less social and economic mobility, so can't get out of those situations. So amen, Krista. Love that added angle on it. And for sure, yeah, men who are threatened by women who make more, they just need to go away. Bye-bye, guys.
I just want to say shout out Krista. Krista often sends us these thoughts and I love them because I just imagine that, I don't know, Krista, this might be me like projecting myself onto you, but when I hear something that I like or I agree with, I go like 0 to 60 real quick. I'm like, yes, oh my God, I love it. And I love your short emails that just point out your thoughts to us. So thank you for writing in. And I totally agree. I think the idea of women being trapped anywhere, whether it's in a romantic relationship, a work relationship, due to finances, is awful. And of course, that comes up more often because, as we've talked about, the wage gap, the wealth gap, they're real things, and women have less access to capital. So financial feminism for all.
Amen.
But lest you think that all the notes we get are great, fear not, because
this is still the internet, people.
There are people out there who disagree with us, and they let us know.
Oh, they do.
Which, again, bring it on. I want to hear. Specifically, we got this one review that, in a very different way, made my heart sing. I'm going to read it now. The title of this review is Terribly Divisive Identity Politics. If you like to group people by gender, race, and sexual identity, ... if you believe that society is nothing more than a struggle between oppressors and the oppressed, so that you can identify any number of groups as oppressed and pit them against their oppressors, i.e. the patriarchy, ... if you believe that you should, quote, check your privilege and apologize for traits that you were born with, ... or that you should be judged by the actions of others, ... then this is the podcast for you. If you, on the other hand, are capable of thinking for yourself, someone who believes in individual responsibility, freedom, and growth, ... do yourself a favor and avoid the sanctimonious, tribalistic podcast full of political correctness and virtue signaling.
I roll. I'm not going to do the like liberal Twitter thing and correct the grammar of all those ellipses, but I do appreciate you pointing them out. I actually have a theory that this is the same reviewer who wrote the privilege belch comment that we talked about in last season's wrap up, because that one went away and this one is now here. And there was previously another one, which now I can't even remember, but I think this person like hates us so much they keep rewriting their review, which I find incredibly amusing. They're so inspired by their hatred that they want to keep rewriting the review instead of just like moving on and doing something productive to boost that individual responsibility.
Oh my gosh. If it is truly, listener, stop listening for your own self. Like, you just can opt out if we make you so angry. Just fine. So, well, the reason I said this makes my heart sing is because it reinforces that I think we're doing a good thing with the podcast, because what I take away from this review is that this person believes that we shouldn't see things like gender and race and different classes, and we shouldn't hear from people who deviate from the quote norm, which in this world that we live in is to be white, is to be straight, is to be male, and is to be middle to upper middle class. Mm-hmm. And this whole podcast exists as a place to examine the systems that we live in and to hear from people whose stories aren't necessarily being told on more mainstream platforms. And I absolutely do believe that we should be checking our privilege. I absolutely do believe that not necessarily need to apologize for the traits you were born with, but you need to recognize the traits that you were born with that not other people were born with, and you need to accommodate for those people who were not born with the things you were born with. It ends with this classic libertarian bullshit, which is like, well, if you just go out on your own, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, and like, if you think for yourself and believe in individual responsibility, no. Individual responsibility only gets you so friggin' far. Other than that, you lean on things like your community. You lean on things like the government, even if you think you don't. And people who refuse to acknowledge the way society and privilege affects their individual lives and all of our lives drive me up a wall.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me two different things. It's one, it's like very sad when I hear people living in a black and white world. The idea that we don't believe in personal responsibility, like obviously we do. We talk about that a lot. We talk about what each of us can do to make our own situations better and the world better. It's the idea that that's diametrically opposed with recognizing structural barriers. Obviously, both can exist and both do exist. So I think there's that, but it's also, there's something that feels very fragile about this worldview that you get threatened when people talk about the patriarchy, because you know that your success is reliant on a system in which not everyone can share that success. And if we actually examine that, that might threaten your success a little bit, but you know what? It's going to give success to a lot more people. And why would we not all want that? I agree with you. It shows that we are doing the right thing if just telling everyone to be responsible personally was the answer. We would have solved inequality generations ago instead of it continuing to get worse. And we're now at a level of income inequality and wealth inequality that's equal to the Great Depression. So we're clearly as a society doing a lot of things wrong and moving in the wrong direction. And if just saying like, you go girl and go out there and get what's yours was the answer, women would be equal already. And we're not. So yeah, so it's cool. Keep the hate mail coming if you got it. We know that's by far not the bulk of listeners. You guys are the most amazing listeners. We feel so lucky to be in a community with all of you. But for those random outliers who hate listen, like, it's cool. It just makes us stronger.
Honestly, I do really mean it when I say you can write into us and tell us you disagree with stuff, but don't be sanctimonious about it. You know? And also, you know, Tanya, we've talked about this, but perhaps in the future, getting people on the show who we do disagree with on certain stuff, having a little bit more, less banter, more arguing, dare to say. I mean, once again, most argumentative 06. I love it. Bring it on. But I really do welcome people with different thoughts because it does make me think. And in the same way, it seems like this reviewer wants to stay in their echo chamber. I really want to be broken out of my echo chamber. I do want my views to be challenged at times because it's very easy to get complacent on stuff and to say, oh, I've done the work of challenging myself. I've done the work of unlearning things. I'm good. I'm fine. And I am never good. I am never fine. There's always more to learn. So it's truly not that we don't want to hear from people, but like, if you are just hate listening, please stop for your own mental health.
Yeah, for sure. I will say too, you know, we have, I think, had a few folks on who've had different viewpoints, which we're always looking for different perspectives. But one thing we're not going to do is we're not going to get people on here and give a platform to hate or give a platform to misogyny or backwards thinking just for the sake of having an argument. I think that is one thing I can't stand about television news these days is the way that they just want to have dynamic arguments or interesting television. Like, no, if someone disagrees with us and is thoughtful about it and has a well-reasoned viewpoint, absolutely, that's welcome. But no people who just want to like rabble rouse or just stir the pot just to stir it or say hateful things because it gets them lots of tweets. Like, we are not all about that life. But I will say, I want to give a shout out to some folks who are clearly willing to challenge their views. One of the things that has continued to surprise us is how many men are listening. When I go out and do events for my blog, Our Next Life, I have been shocked how many guys have come up to me and said, oh, I listened to the podcast. I really loved this episode. This episode really made me think. And I'm going like, damn, they're not only listening, they're like really listening. It's not like they just listened once. So to all the guys listening, you rule. Thank you so much. You guys are out here leading the way. So let's all keep fighting together.
Yes. 2 straight white men who have been listening to the show and have sent us some notes. First, I want to give a shout out to Bo Humphreys, who we've had some lovely interactions on Twitter, and he has left us a Canadian review. Thank you so much. I haven't figured out how to see it yet, but I will get to it eventually. But Bo has been great in that he is a repeat listener, like some of the men that you've been meeting, Tanya. And also, he said, he quoted me on Twitter. He said, all monarchies aggravate the socialist in me. And he said, totally agree. Royalty is a thing of the past. Thanks, Bo. I'm glad to know you're on my side. And we also got this really nice email from a man named Steven. Steven said, the show has given me a lot to think about and work on, and I love that it goes deeper and wider than the basic, and now tiresome, to be honest, tropes of FI and other personal finance pods. I've even started an emotional labor invoice that I track on my phone to give me a more concrete appreciation and awareness for what my wife does for us and learn how I can better share the burden. And like, Steven, I know you're already married, but I am willing to leave T-Bone for you. So, lol JK, T-Bone, love you forever. But that is so touching. That is so wonderful. And you sound like an amazing husband. And I think it goes to show back to that bad review that we got that like, yeah, if you are like a cool thinking, confident, straight white man, you can listen to the show and understand that we're not out here, to use your words, Tanya, like to bash straight white dudes. We are out here to just say, hey, we are living in this heteronormative white supremacist patriarchy. And what can we do about changing that?
Speaking of emotional labor, that is for sure a topic that's coming back in The Fairer Cents season 3. So let's talk about season 3. We've got, you guys, some super exciting stuff planned. I will just say we have a couple of guests lined up already who are, I don't know, is it fair to say household names, Kara?
It's fair.
Yeah. And I like sit over here just kind of shaking with glee at the thought. But you guys are going to have to wait, but not all that long. We expect to be back in a few months. So please stay subscribed in your favorite podcast app so that you get new episodes when we are ready to launch them. We're probably also going to drop a couple of episodes outside of the season. Like we know you and I are both going to be at the Sense Positive Women and Financial Independence Retreat in early November. We're going to do an episode there. So stay tuned. There's tons of good stuff coming your way.
We've gotten a lot of feedback from listeners about topics they want to see us cover. And like we said with the motherhood episode, there's a lot of things we've touched on in previous episodes that we could certainly dive much deeper into. So there is a lot of really good stuff coming up.
Yeah. So this fall, again, we'll have some other content for you guys. You can always follow us on Twitter for lots of discussion along the way. That's at Fairer Cents. We're not wrapping up. We're just sharing the Twitter address. But some of the topics that we already know we're going to cover are digging into economics for women who don't have children, child-free women, talking a bit more about Kara's favorite subject, white feminism, TM. Something that I'm super passionate about, talking about women's voices and how that impacts our money.
Tanya, do you think that we can get Lena Dunham on the show so I can say to her podcast face that she's a white feminist? Do you think we could make that happen?
I don't know. Let's manifest that.
Let's manifest that. Oh my gosh. Incredible.
Yeah. No, but seriously, we are super excited about some of the folks who are going to be on, some of the conversations that we're having with them. We could for sure be bringing season 3 back sooner, but we've both got a lot going on. And I will say this is really more on my end. This is me, Tanya, for having a little bit of a lag between seasons 2 and 3. And it's very much because I am in full on book writing mode. So I recently finished all the edits on my manuscript for Work Optional, which comes out in March 2019. But then there's going to be book marketing and all that stuff, which is one of those things that seems totally normal. And I spent my career doing a particular type of marketing. But now that I've retired, it just seems so overwhelming. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get all this stuff done? In part because I just am not especially interested in working 12-hour days anymore. So Kara has been amazing at being really supportive of that, for not yelling at me when I got a podcast edited late because of book stuff. Coming back full force next season with so much great content and really make it worth the wait.
We love this podcast so much. And like I said earlier, we do strive to do our research and to make it sound good and to be the best. But we do have a lot of things going on outside the show. And so Tanya has just written this amazing book and also is retired and should spend some time on some beaches / like skiing, because that's your thing. And I will be hosting events with my company, Bravely. I've got several this fall and some into early 2019 already on the schedule. I'll be doing some traveling / I'm not going to lie, I'm really, really looking forward to when the most recent season of New Girl comes out on Netflix. I will be binging that. So can't record the podcast. I've got binging to do.
It's important to have priorities.
I just want to be clear with everyone. Just want people to know what I'm about.
So that's what's going on with us. We've both got good things going on behind the scenes, good things we're working on together. We'll have more news for future stuff as we roll that stuff out this fall and into season 3. But the big picture news is there are many, many more seasons of The Fairer Cents coming your way, covering tons of topics, revisiting some of these topics where we need to go into more depth. And I don't know, I'm so excited. I love doing this with you, Kara. I love our listeners, and I can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah, it's so funny that this has become such a staple in my life. It's something I love doing, it's something I get so much joy out of. I love all of our listeners, all of the notes, and I really have loved everything about it. So thank you, Tanya, and thank you, everyone listening. And yes, we have at least, I feel like we really promised 27 seasons. So
25 more.
Buckle up. Buckle up. 25 more. Whew. So thank you for being a part of season 2. Keep rocking your money.
Keep crushing the patriarchy.
And we will be back with you soon.
Until then, you guys,
stay rad.
The Fairer Cents are me, Tanya Hester, and the world's best co-host, Kara Perez. Our theme song is by The Insider, our ad music is by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find out more info about the other artists you hear on the show at our website, thefairerscents.com. You can always find me at ournextlife.com and Kara at bravelygo.com.